5 Indian schools were named in the top 10 list for the world's best school prizes, and one Indian school became a top 3 finalist. These 5 schools are outliers, outstanding in their ability to put in place teaching practices and performance that impacts not just the lives of the students, but the communities. Making it to the shortlist itself meant demonstrating community collaboration, environmental action, innovation, overcoming adversity, and supporting healthy lives. That's not a small feat, given the fact that they come from a country that ranks among the top 5 economies in the world, but one that does poorly when it comes to educating its children. In a Swiss study conducted before the pandemic, India's education system ranked 43rd out of 64 major economies. It's clear that India needs a textbook to run better schools and working towards that is T4 Education, the global platform that instituted the world's best school prizes. It is collaborating with these schools to develop transformational toolkits which provide step-by-step instructions on how other schools can replicate these models. Now more than ever before, we need better learning outcomes. The learning loss suffered by India's 320 million school-going children is severe after the pandemic kept them out of classrooms for more than 2 years. EdTech was started as a solution to bridge the learning gap, but in rural and semi-urban India, it was a cart without wheels. The World Bank says the share of children living in learning poverty was already at 53% before the pandemic. It could potentially reach 70% in a post-pandemic era. So how can India transform its education system and bring innovation and collaboration to learning? Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shereen Bhan. Joining me on the show today, Vikas Pota, the founder and CEO of T4 Education, and 3 social innovation leaders that run 3 of the 5 Indian schools that have been shortlisted for the world's best school prizes. Kruti Bharucha of People, Saurabh Taneja of the Akanksha Foundation, and Rohit Kumar of the Apni Shala Foundation. Kruti, gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program, and congratulations to each one of you. But Saurabh, let me start by asking you, because Akanksha Foundation and your school did make it to the top 3 of the best schools list. And I have to say, I've been privileged to actually spend a day at one of the Akanksha Foundation schools. So particularly heartening to know that you've been able to achieve this feat. So Saurabh, let me start by asking you about this journey so far, but more importantly, in light of what the pandemic has done, the learning loss, but more importantly, the road ahead and the lessons to be learned. What has been the big change, the big shift?
Thanks a lot, Shereen, first and foremost, for spotlighting these stories of the stronger schools, as Vikas is very aptly amplifying and advocating for the same. Look, there are 2 or 3 big lessons that at least at Akanksha Foundation we are carrying forward post the pandemic. One is that the partnership with the parents and the community is of paramount importance. For Akanksha Foundation, this philosophy was always there, but more so in the last couple of years during the pandemic, it strengthened further. And we have seen its positive impact on our children, with 99% of them coming back to physical schools as soon as they reopen. So that's one. Second, I understand that there have been fairly too many limitations on tech integration in our schools. We still believe and are hopeful for a more positive and optimistic scenario with more of hybrid learning coming into place. And we are seeing its impact again in our spaces and in some of the spaces which are innovating in a very thoughtful way, without really diminishing the role of the educator or teacher, but really using technology to complement or supplement what the teachers do. And I think if we can combine these 2 aspects, we will be able to address the short-term learning losses that we have experienced during the pandemic, Shri.
Yes, collaboration with the community is going to be of utmost importance. But let me bring Vikas into the conversation. Vikas, thanks very much for joining us. I want to understand from you, what drove you to start T4 Education through the course of the pandemic? Your attempt is to try and bring together schools, to try and bring together educators from around the world to navigate the new normal. What's the experience been so far, Vikas, for you?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and congratulations to all the schools who are present here today. Shereen, that's a really important question. And, I'm sure like many of you in India, I receive a lot of presentations on the future of education, which actually drive me mad. And because what I believe the future of education is, and what the pandemic demonstrated, is quite simply the need to have better schools and to invest in institution building. And so what the world's best prizes are is a mechanism for surfacing best practices from schools such as who are represented here today, because I believe that we have lots to learn to make sure that schools around the world can improve. And when you talk about the learning loss in India, let me just tell you, there are almost 500 million children today around the world in failing schools, as reported by their own governments. And so we just need to do a better job in that. And the mechanism is one effort in trying to surfacing best practices from schools around the world so that others can get inspired, can learn, can share, can collaborate, and all these wonderful things that can flow from that. And so that's what the motivation of the World's Best School Prizes is.
Well, thanks very much for sharing that with us, and you're absolutely right. The effort needs to be on how we can learn from these experiences. More importantly, how can we scale and replicate these models? But Kruti, let me come to you and understand what's happening as far as people's efforts are concerned. Now, you've been working in Delhi. You've also been working with the state government of Madhya Pradesh. To start with, Kruti, education and a bulk of driving education is still dependent on government schools and government infrastructure. How crucial is it going to have to be for the private sector, for the social sector, to continue to deepen its partnership, collaborate with the government to try and improve the quality of learning, to improve the quality of education in government schools? And how open are state governments at this point in time to this idea? You're working with two state governments, Delhi and Madhya Pradesh. What's the experience been like, Kruti?
Well, I think just on your first question, I think it's going to be critical to work with the government. There are about 150 million children that study in more than 1 million government schools, and often these children are from the poorest and most vulnerable communities. So if we really are serious about transforming the state of education in the country, we must do it through the government school system and system strengthening of government schools. I think there are a lot of opportunities now. Governments are extremely open to having non-state actors and non-profits come in to support particular interventions and to actually improve the system. I think what's critical in making a government partnership successful is really co-developing and co-designing those solutions with the government, rather than taking a particular solution that an organization believes in and then kind of going in and trusting it on a large government's school system. So there are constraints. There are cost constraints, there are budget constraints, there are staffing constraints within government schools. Many schools are, small schools, across the countryside in India. Some of them have only 50 students, 1 to 2 teachers. And so those are the realities of what we are dealing with when we are actually looking at working with a mix of rural and urban schools. It's very important to keep in mind the constraints, the real constraints that governments face. It's equally important to identify champions of change at the state government and national government level, and to work very closely to actually supplement their efforts and not substitute their efforts. So as an organization, that's something that we really believe in, that it's important to really be a thought partner, an implementation support partner, and also through our school in Delhi to actually show what is possible.
You're absolutely right in pointing out that there are constraints which are real constraints that one has to learn to navigate and live with. But Rohit, that's exactly the point that I want to address with you and your experience at Apni Shala, because you're also collaborating with about 20 plus government schools. To Kruti's points, these are real challenges, whether it's budgetary constraints or staffing constraints. How do you ensure that you do, in her words, supplement government's efforts as opposed to substituting them? And what is the ideal model going forward on how we can actually take these successful models and replicate them across different parts of the country? Rohit.
Thank you, Shereen, and thank you, Vikas, for this experience of going through the prize, because that definitely gave us a lot of reflections. One, I think, absolutely agree with Kruti in understanding that governments are open, they are engaging and opening up more and more dialogue here. What we are also understanding is that what is the type of school we are trying to kind of replicate, and when we are thinking about education, what is the core piece that education is missing at this point. So when we went into schools in 2013, when we started Apni Shala's work, what we noticed was that there is some academic work that is already happening. There is some physical development work that is already happening. But what was missing in schools was that social and emotional development piece. And that's exactly what Apni Shala said, that we don't want to start doing what the government schools are already doing, but how can we bring in what is not there? And there is enough and more research that says that without social and emotional development, without well-being, learning of any sorts cannot happen. You can have the best teacher in a math classroom, but if the child has experienced abuse in the house or is hungry right now, they cannot learn. And that's when bringing in education and mental health together was very, very critical. And that's the experiment we are hoping to do with Coach, that can Coach become that model school within the government school system? That showcases how this work can happen. And then when there's a model that is already existing, and slowly building that relationship on ground with teachers, with principals, with parents, then it has a better buy-in.
How do you make it happen, Saurabh? What have been the ingredients that you've had to prioritize and focus on to ensure that you actually make Akanksha one of the top 3 schools in the best schools list? And what is it that we can take away from this if one were to put a playbook together?
So Shereen, I would say that one of the important aspects that we as a nation must embrace is what Vikas highlighted, which is really seeing the role of schools at the forefront of change. I just think that there's not adequate attention given in really thinking about amplifying what's really working in strong schools. And I think the opportunities to be able to use the forum like T4 or so many others that even happen in our own country to really study what goes into make an excellent school, whether it's run by a non-state actor or as well as this, government itself, will be supremely, useful for policymakers first and foremost. Second, I think like all of us on this panel will concur the phenomenally important role of educators in any school system, which is teachers as well as the school principals. And I just think that in India, we really, really need to find a way to embrace far more autonomy and empowerment, with which we believe will come the accountability. And I think that's one of the most important levers that we at Akanksha have prioritized over the years in building a strong ecosystem, as well as, really not treating the partnership with the parents as well as the community as something that happens outside. Right? And how do you really see the role of the school in building the community, or see it as a microcosm of the world or the community that we are creating, and really build far more community collaboration beyond just engaging the parents on school management committees for that matter. And I think that's the second lever. And the third, I would say, is that, it's an opportune time post-COVID where, the world, the Education Summit recently held, by UNICEF, is talking about really reimagining the role of education and what does education look like in the coming decades in and of itself. And I think that's a great conversation to sort of start in our country. And that's another secret sauce, where we are constantly engaging in dialogue with our children, our parents, our educators on what's most meaningful for you and for the children and for the community. And I think if this kind of a continuous dialogue could continue at multiple levels, I think that we will have the necessary ingredients that will allow for some of these practices to scale or amplify.
You're talking about having a conversation and starting a dialogue on how we can reimagine education, reimagine the classroom, and that's what we're attempting to do here on this program on Young Turks. So Rohit, let me get you to build on what we just heard there from Kruti and Saurabh. When we talk about reimagining the classroom with the use of technology, bringing much more of technology into the classroom, changing the method and the manner of educating children, the manner in which educators themselves are being skilled and trained. Outline for me the things that you believe policymakers, governments, educators, school principals, the social sector needs to focus on. What could this new model, this new way signal herald?
I think, Shaneen, one thing that we keep reminding ourselves at Apni Shala is that when we speak about system is not an abstract concept, right? System is people. And when we are thinking about people, we have to think about relationships. So say, for example, at Apni Shala as well, when we kind of think about building a new partnership with a government school, then we start from the very core and very ground, that what is our relationship with parents of that school? What is the relationship with students or teachers or principals of that school? And then we go to the municipal office to get the final letter of approval that, hey, we want to work in these 20 schools or 22 schools, right? Currently, MCGM is asking us to do like the entire L ward or M ward, but we are choosing not to because we really believe that when we are building relationships and people really understand what needs to change, it will take time. And that brings to my second point, which is when we are speaking about scale will look different for different types of initiatives.
Because let me come to you. You started the program by saying that you were being sent presentations that drove you mad or drove you up the wall in terms of what the ideal school should look like. At the end of this exercise of being able to review and assess what really goes into making a model school, what really goes into driving excellence and good outcomes within a classroom, what is your message today to governments, to policymakers and to educators?
So there's so many points that I want to actually draw upon, Shereen, in this part of your program. The first thing is, you know, when you look at this program and you look at the ticker at the bottom, which says reinventing classrooms with technology, whilst I agree that technology is important, I don't think it's the biggest priority we have to place an emphasis on. Actually, what we know is that we need to make sure that we get the best and brightest teachers into classrooms all over the world. And for that, we have a heck of a lot of work to do. And we know that the holy grail in making sure that we improve learning outcomes lies in making sure that we train our teachers effectively. Now, what we are doing, for example, at T4, post the first round of the World's Best School Prizes, is we're bringing all of these teachers into a professional learning community, and people can download our app on iOS or Android. It's called T4 Communities. And the idea there is that let us learn together, because there's so many similarities of the challenges and the opportunities that schools have around the world that we can learn from, which our prizes actually showcase in a significant way. The second thing I want to tell you is you ask about the secret sauce, and the three leaders that you have over here are far too modest to actually talk about it like this. But I suspect that whilst they're finalists in a particular category, they could actually become finalists in all the other categories that also are there, simply because they're fantastic leaders. And so I'm on the board of an NGO called Global School Leaders, which many of you will know about. And again, the emphasis on leadership in education is something that we need to bring post-pandemic for sure, but we have to recognize and acknowledge the role that good leadership plays in moving things forward and in advancing. And in education, you know, we don't have much actual leadership training and development that is offered to teachers and school leaders. And so I would suspect that the answer, actually the secret sauce, is in making sure that we have more Krutis, Rohits, Saurabhs, and such in the world of education that actually move things along. And then the third thing I want to mention is, you know, these prizes, the prize is a mechanism. And it's not, yes, of course, we're celebrating these schools. You are putting on a program to showcase these schools, which I'm very grateful for. But actually, it's a mechanism to make sure that we inspire conversation and to make sure that those that are watching, you know, at the dining room table this evening, they say, hey, I heard about this school that focuses on social emotional learning for our children. Can we take that practice to our school? So all of your viewers that are watching should be inspired by the three examples here today. Go and learn about them and go to your children's schools and say, we want this in our school. And this is regardless of whether you're a private school, you're a religious school, you're a not-for-profit school. These solutions are scalable and they need your leadership and advocacy, which I'm really grateful to you for. Lastly, we launch our next round of applications for the World's Best School Prizes in a couple of weeks, and we encourage you to have a look at our website and engage with our rubrics and frameworks. We would love to see more Indian schools actually come forward, because the story isn't as bleak as what people put out. Yes, there are these challenges, but these three schools, as an example, have showcased that excellence resides everywhere, but the opportunity to tell their story, only, we need to make sure that they have that opportunity. And that's the most important thing through the prizes that we're trying to do.
Well, I think that point that you made about relevance of solutions for our context, for the Indian context, that's a very important point as well. And I think that is going to be very important as we, go through this process of reimagining what the solutions can be for our schools and for our classrooms. Kruti, Saurabh, Rohit and Vikas, thanks very much for joining us here on this special edition of Young Turks. We wish all of you the very best of luck, and thanks very much for your time as well as for your insights.